My name is Emily Carter. I'm 31. At 7:43 on a Tuesday morning in late October, I was standing on the cedar deck of the mountain cabin I had spent 14 months and every dollar I'd saved to buy, watching a moving truck grind up my unpaved driveway with my mother hanging out of the passenger window before it even stopped rolling. She had on her good coat, the camel-colored one she saved for situations where she expected witnesses, and she was already gesturing at the tree line, already measuring the property with her eyes, already deciding what belonged to her. I knew what was inside that truck. I knew because she'd told me 4 days earlier on a phone call that lasted exactly 11 minutes before I ended it. "We're moving in Saturday," she'd said. Not a question, not a request. A statement delivered with the flat certainty of someone who had never once been told no by me. "The Mercer Street house is gone. Family helps each other. You have that cabin all to yourself and you don't need all that space." I'd stood in my kitchen with the phone pressed to my cheek and listened to my own breathing for 3 full seconds before I said anything. "Mom, that's not going to happen." "Emily." Her voice dropped into a register I'd known since I was 7 years old. Low, deliberate, the sound she made right before she said something designed to end a conversation permanently. "We are moving in tomorrow. If you don't like it, find somewhere else." She hung up. That was 4 days ago. I hadn't been idle. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before I go any further, if stories about standing up for yourself mean something to you, if you've ever had to hold a line against someone who was supposed to love you, please hit like and subscribe. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now and what time it is there. I genuinely want to know, because what I'm about to tell you took 3 years to survive and 11 months to prepare for. And every single day of that preparation was worth it. Let me start at the beginning. I grew up in Clearfield, a mid-sized town in the middle of the state where everybody knew your parents before they knew you. My mother, Diane Carter, had a gift for that, for making sure people knew her first. She was the woman who organized the church fundraisers, who brought casseroles to sick neighbors, who could light up a room just by walking into it. In public, she was remarkable, generous, warm, the kind of woman people described as the heart of her community. At home, things were different. I don't remember a time when I wasn't aware that my purpose in the family was to be useful. Not loved, useful. There's a difference, and I learned it young. When I was 12, I started doing the household bookkeeping because my mother said I was good with numbers. When I was 16, I worked a weekend job at the hardware store and handed half my paycheck to my parents without being asked because the alternative was listening to a 3-day cycle of sighing and pointed comments about sacrifice. When I was 19 and applying to colleges, my mother sat me down and explained, gently and reasonably, and with the complete confidence of someone laying out objective facts, that a 2-year program would make more sense financially and wouldn't leave the family stretched thin while I was away. I didn't go to the 4-year school I'd been accepted to. I went to the community college 40 minutes from home, and I commuted, and I didn't complain, because my mother said, "Emily, family helps each other," in the tone that meant the conversation was over. By the time I was 22, I had a paralegal certificate and a position at a small firm downtown and a checking account with $3,100 in it that I guarded with my life. My father, Richard, had run a small construction operation that failed badly in the year I turned 20, and his credit score had slipped below 580. He needed a co-signer on a lease for their new apartment. My mother called me on a Wednesday evening. "It's just a signature," she said. "It doesn't cost you anything." I co-signed the lease. I was 22 years old, and I co-signed because the alternative, the phone calls, the long silences at Sunday dinners, the way she would look at me with that specific expression that managed to convey both disappointment and suffering simultaneously, was something I didn't have the tools to withstand yet. I was 22. I said yes. I was good at saying yes. It was the only language they had ever really taught me. By 25, I'd built something I was quietly proud of. 3 years of paralegal work, a full caseload, 2 promotions, and a night school certification that qualified me for a junior analyst position at Garrison and Holt, a litigation firm in the city that handled mid-range commercial fraud and contract disputes. It wasn't glamorous. It was long hours, dense document work, meticulously structured evidence chains, but I was extraordinarily good at it. Audits, paper trails, forensic contract review, fraud detection. I spent my days building cases out of timestamps and signatures, finding the thread that, when pulled carefully, unraveled everything. I moved to a studio apartment on Alcott Street in the city. I paid $1,180 a month and lived carefully and felt, for the first time in my life, like I was standing on ground that was mine. My mother called every Sunday. The calls had a pattern: 20 minutes of family news followed by a request. Just this month, Emily, your father's prescription costs went up. Just this once, the car needs the back tires. Just until the payment clears. We don't want to overdraft. I was 27 the first time I opened a spreadsheet to track the payments. I want to be precise about why I did that. It wasn't suspicion. Not yet. It was temperament. I track things. I build documentation the way other people make coffee, automatically, as a basic function of how I move through the world. The spreadsheet was organized simply: date, amount, nature of request, source of funds. I labeled it family account. I kept it in a folder on my desktop next to my work files. I didn't think of it as evidence. I thought of it as clarity. The first year, the total was $14,200. The second year, $22,800. By the time I turned 29, the running total in the spreadsheet had crossed $67,000. I stared at that number for a long time one November evening, sitting at my kitchen table with a glass of water that had gone warm. I didn't feel angry. I felt something quieter and more durable than anger. Something that had been building in the bones of my work for years. The same feeling I got when I was deep in a fraud case and the evidence finally resolved into a clear shape. I felt like I was beginning to understand the structure of something I'd been living inside of without ever having a map. The promotion to associate litigation analyst came 6 months before I found the cabin. $74,000 a year. Senior casework. A small office with a window. I told my parents I'd gotten a modest raise and was putting something away. I did not mention the exact figure. I had learned by then to manage the perimeter of information. I found the property online on a Sunday night in February, eating leftover soup at my desk. 43 acres north of Kettering Pass, ridge country, pine trees that went up 50 feet on the north side of the lot. A small lake at the western edge, an existing structure, a timber frame cabin, 1,400 square feet, needing work but structurally solid. The listing price was $218,000. I closed on it in August. I drove up the mountain the first afternoon with a sleeping bag and 2 bags of groceries and stood on the deck and looked out at the lake for a long time without saying anything. The water was still. The pine trees made that sound they make in the wind. Not loud, just present. I felt the specific relief of a person who has been holding their breath for a very long time and has finally exhaled. I called my parents 3 days after the sale was final. My mother said, "It's very remote." Her voice was neutral in a way I'd learned to read. She was calculating. "That's why I bought it," I said. She visited in late September, walked the deck, looked at the lake, said, "You'll rattle around in here by yourself." Then she picked up a smooth stone I'd set on the railing as a doorstop, turned it over in her palm, and said, "It's always nice to have family nearby, in case something happens." I made coffee. We sat together and didn't talk about what she meant. 6 weeks after her visit, at 4:17 on a Thursday afternoon, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I was at my desk at the cabin, reviewing exhibit lists for a contract dispute case. I almost let it go to voicemail. I answered. "Ms. Carter," said a professionally neutral voice, "I'm calling from Kendrick Financial regarding the home equity line of credit in your name, account ending in 7714. I remember exactly the way my body responded. Not panic, stillness, the kind of absolute physical stillness that is the body's way of processing something it doesn't yet have language for. "I don't have a HELOC account," I said. A brief pause. "We have a signed application on file, Ms. Carter. Dated 14 months ago. The line was approved for $40,000 and has been drawn in full." I sat down on the floor of my home office. I didn't decide to. One moment I was standing. The next, the wood was cold through my jeans and I was sitting on the floor with the phone pressed against my ear and the window light falling across the desk above me. "I was in London 14 months ago," I said. My voice came out steady and I was grateful for it. "I was on a work assignment. I've never applied for anything with Kendrick Financial. I need you to tell me the date on that application." The representative gave me the date. October 8th. I closed my eyes. I was in a conference room on Marylebone High Street on October 8th, reviewing deposition exhibits for a commercial fraud case with 3 partners and 2 opposing counsel. I had my boarding pass, my hotel receipts, my passport stamps, and the firm's billing records that placed me in that room. I could document every hour of that day in London with multiple corroborating sources. And I knew exactly who had signed my name in Clearfield while I was there. "Miss Carter?" The representative's voice came through the phone. "Are you still—" "Yes," I said. "I'm here. I need to know how to initiate a fraud dispute. I need the specific process, the required documentation, and the name of the department that handles forgery claims." I had a pen. I wrote everything down. Now, I need to pause here and explain something about the year that followed. When I hung up that phone and sat on my office floor for approximately 6 minutes before I stood back up, I made a decision that changed how all of this resolved. I decided not to confront them, not immediately, not yet. Because I had spent 6 years working fraud cases, and I knew the cardinal rule: you do not reveal the investigation before it's complete. You let the subject continue behaving as if they're safe, because a subject who feels safe keeps producing evidence, and a subject who feels exposed destroys it. My parents thought they knew me. They knew the Emily who said yes, the Emily who covered the car payment and the electric bill and the co-signed lease. They did not know the Emily who spent her working days building evidentiary structures that held up in court. They had never connected those 2 versions of me because it had never occurred to them to look for the second one. That was their miscalculation. I opened a new folder on my laptop. I labeled it Property. Then I got to work. The first step was pulling my own credit report, all 3 bureaus. The HELOC appeared on 2 of them, listed as an active account in good standing, because my parents had been making minimum payments with the draw funds, essentially paying interest on money they'd stolen from my credit identity, just enough to keep the account from flagging delinquent. Smart. In a specific kind of way, not smart enough. I requested the full application file from Kendrick Financial under a fraud dispute claim. They were required by federal banking regulation to provide it. The file arrived in a secure digital portal 11 days later. The signed application, a copy of the notarization, and the identification documents submitted with it, a photocopy of what appeared to be my driver's license, which I examined carefully and which had been altered, the address changed to my parents' Mercer Street property. The signature on the application was not mine. I could see it immediately, the way you can see the seams on something badly assembled when you know what the original is supposed to look like. But I needed more than my own recognition. I needed documentation. I reached out to Dr. Patricia Howell. Patricia Howell was a forensic document examiner who had been on contract with Garrison and Holt for 4 years. I had worked with her on 3 cases. She was precise, methodical, and deeply credible on the stand. I contacted her privately, paid her standard consultation rate out of my own pocket, and submitted 2 samples. The HELOC application signature and a set of samples from my mother's personal correspondence, birthday cards, notes from the family, that I had saved over the years the way I saved everything, without knowing why, just because I did. Dr. Howell's written report came back 3 weeks later. 7 pages, detailed analysis of pen pressure, letter formation, baseline angle, and specific identifying characteristics. Her conclusion: the signature on the HELOC application showed significant departure from the established baseline of the subject's authentic signature and substantial correspondence with the comparison handwriting samples provided as Sample B. Sample B was my mother's handwriting. I printed the report. I added it to the property folder. The notary was Gerald Fitch, retired Clearfield County clerk, family friend for 30 years. I found his information in the public notary registry. His commission was still active. My mother had brought him apple pie at Christmas since I was a child. I added his name to my documentation file under a section I labeled Witnesses and Connected Parties, and did not contact him. Not yet. 6 months into my investigation, I came back to the Garrison and Holt offices for a quarterly case review. I was on partial remote by then, handling document analysis from the cabin and coming in every few weeks. I walked into the second-floor kitchen on a Thursday morning and found 3 of my colleagues, Dana Whitfield, James Okafor, and a newer analyst named Priya Nair, clustered near the coffee station in the particular way that means you've walked into a conversation about yourself. Dana gave me the smile. "Hey, Emily." "Hey." I poured my coffee. I kept my voice easy. "What's going on?" "Nothing," James said, immediately and very convincingly. "I found out what it was at lunch." Priya told me, carefully and with visible discomfort, watching my face the entire time she spoke. My mother had called the firm, she said, approximately 2 weeks earlier. She had asked to speak with someone in human resources. She had described me, and Priya was careful here, parsing her words, as going through a difficult period, as making impulsive financial decisions, and as potentially showing signs of instability in her judgment. She had said, in those words, that she was worried about her daughter and wanted someone at the firm to be aware. Priya said all of this quickly, quietly, in the conference room over untouched sandwiches. I kept my face very still. I thanked her. I said I appreciated her telling me. I picked up my sandwich, took one bite, and chewed it slowly while I looked at the conference room wall. My face was warm. My hands were steady. Something had clarified inside me. Not hardened. That word implies brittleness, and what I felt was the opposite. It was the feeling I got on a case when the last piece of the structure clicked into place and you could see the whole shape of what had happened. Clear, coherent, inescapable. She had called my workplace. While she was drawing on $40,000 in fraudulently obtained credit in my name, while she was planning to arrive at my property with a moving truck and announce herself as a resident, she had called my employer and described me as unstable. She had tried to damage the one thing I had that she couldn't take through a family friend notary: my professional reputation. I finished my sandwich. I requested a formal copy of my complete HR file from the records manager. It was, as I expected, clean. I made sure I had a copy. Then I went back to my desk and opened my laptop and added a new section to the property folder: Workplace Interference. I documented the date, the substance of the call, the names of the staff members Priya had named, and the potential professional impact. I kept the language precise and factual, the way I did in all my documentation. No adjectives, no interpretation. Just what happened, when, and what it meant in terms of evidence. On the drive back up the mountain that evening, I stopped at a gas station outside of Kettering Pass for coffee. I sat in the parking lot for a while with the engine off, watching the October dark come down over the ridge. My phone had 2 missed calls from my mother. I didn't listen to the voicemails yet. I pulled up my spreadsheet. The family ledger now totaled $115,247, counting every payment I'd made since March of 2017. I had bank records and wire receipts for $89,600 of it. The remaining $25,647 was documented through email correspondence. My mother's own emails, in which she had named the amounts, explained the needs, and in several cases explicitly confirmed receipt. I sat with that number in the parking lot for a while. Then I drove back to the cabin, and I made dinner, and I worked on a contract case until 11:30 at night, and before I went to bed I added 3 new line items to the ledger and updated the running total. The spreadsheet was 211 rows long. Over the following months, my parents' situation deteriorated in ways I was aware of but chose not to intervene in. The Mercer Street property, my parents had owned it outright after paying off a 30-year mortgage, or so I'd believed, had been leveraged. A second mortgage I hadn't known about, poor refinancing decisions, an equity draw that predated the HELOC by several years. The details came to me in pieces through conversations my mother initiated, always angled as requests for help, always framed as temporary emergencies that would resolve if I just covered this month's payment. I did not cover any payments during this period. I said, calmly and with documented follow-up texts, that I was not in a position to help with the house, and that they should speak with a housing counselor. I said this every time she asked, which was 6 times between January and July. In August, the house went to foreclosure. My mother called me from a neighbor's driveway at 8:41 on a Wednesday morning, her voice thin and very controlled. She told me what had happened. She told me they had nowhere to go. She told me it had come to this because of financial pressures she'd been managing alone for years, and that the family had given and sacrificed, and that the cabin had space, and I had room. And family helps each other, Emily. That is the only thing I have ever asked of you. Family helps each other. I listened to the whole thing. I did not interrupt. When she was finished, I said, "I hear you, Mom. That sounds like a very hard morning. I want you to know I'm thinking about you." I paused. "I'll talk to you soon." I hung up. 4 days later, the phone call came. "We are moving in Saturday. If you don't like it, find somewhere else." I stayed up until midnight that night finalizing my documentation. By 12:47 a.m., I had 3 folders on my dining table. Folder 1, green, the ledger, 211 rows, $115,247 total, sourced to bank records, wire transfers, and email confirmations, index page at the front, cross-referenced by year and by category, loan repayments outstanding, covered expenses, coerced gifts. A summary page at the back with a clear running total and the percentage documented by formal financial records, 78.2%. Folder 2, red, the HELOC fraud. My passport stamps for October 3rd through 15th, 2 years prior. My flight manifests for both directions, with my passport number listed on the airline record. My hotel receipts from the Harrington Hotel, Marylebone, 8 nights. The Garrison and Holt billing records showing my client meetings on October 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th, each with start time, end time, and client matter number. The HELOC application copy. The notarization documentation listing Gerald Fitch as notary. Dr. Howell's 7-page forensic report with her letterhead and signature. A 1-page summary I had written myself chronologically that could be read in under 2 minutes, and that concluded with this sentence. The subject was in London at the time of notarization and can document her location through 17 independent sources. Folder 3, white, the rental agreement. Standard residential lease for the property at $2,800 per month, reviewed and annotated by Marcus Elwell at Elwell and Cross on Prescott Avenue, who had also prepared a 1-page memo outlining the legal basis for the terms. Behind the lease, a formal notice of trespass, pre-dated, pre-signed by Marcus, to be served in the event the rental agreement was refused, and my parents attempted to remain on the property. I also had, on my laptop, a fully drafted letter to the Kendrick Financial Fraud Department and a formal complaint to the State Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division, both addressed and ready to send with one click. I stacked the 3 folders. I set the smooth lake stone I kept on the deck railing on top of them to hold them flat. I went to bed. I slept 8 hours. At 7:15 a.m. on Tuesday, I was on the deck with coffee. The air was cold, 31 degrees, a thin frost on the dock boards, the lake surface absolutely still in the way it gets before the morning wind comes up. The trees on the far bank had gone amber and deep red overnight. I could see my breath. I had the 3 folders on the outdoor table behind me, face down. At 7:43, the moving truck came around the last bend in the drive. My mother was out of the passenger door before the wheels stopped. She had the camel coat. She had the expression, already managing, already 3 steps ahead, already deciding where the furniture would go. My father climbed down from the cab slowly, with the deliberate movements of a man who had learned to let things precede him. He saw me on the deck. He stopped for a moment. My mother came up the path without hesitation, the way she'd been entering rooms her whole life, like the room was already hers. "Emily," she said from the base of the steps. Her voice was warm, preemptively forgiving, already positioning herself in the story she was going to tell later. "Don't make this into something it doesn't have to be." "Good morning, Mom," I said. I kept my voice level. "Good morning, Dad." My father said, "Emily." Just that, quietly. My mother started up the deck stairs. She reached the top and looked past me toward the front door with a practiced measuring look, the look of someone deciding where to put the couch. "We're going to need to talk about the room arrangement. Your father can't manage stairs, so the ground floor—" "Mom!" I stepped slightly to one side, not blocking her, just redirecting her attention. "Sit down. I need to show you some things before we talk about anything else." She looked at me. A pause. Very brief. She was good at recovering, but it was there. "There's nothing to discuss," she said. "Emily, we have a truck to unload. We've been driving since 4 in the morning." "You can tell the driver to wait," I said. "I promise this won't take long, but you need to sit down first." My father had come up the steps by then. He was standing 2 steps below the deck level, not quite joining us, not quite separate. His eyes had gone to the table with the folders on it. Something moved across his face. Not surprise exactly. Something more complicated. Something that looked like a man recognizing the shape of a thing he has been dreading for a long time. My mother crossed her arms. She squared herself toward me in the stance I'd been watching since childhood. The stance that meant she had already decided the outcome and was simply waiting for the scene to catch up. "Whatever point you're trying to make," she said, "we are your family. I raised you. I have sacrificed more than you will ever fully appreciate for this family. And the least you can do, after everything, is offer us a place to land when we need one. Family helps each other. That is not something I should have to remind you of." There it was. The phrase, 3 times in 4 days, now twice in 2 minutes. "Family helps each other," I said. "I've been thinking about that a lot." I turned to the table and picked up the first folder. The green one. I set it on the outdoor table between us and opened the index page and turned it so she could read it. "This is a complete documented ledger of every financial transfer I have made to you or on your behalf since March of 2017. Every entry is sourced to a bank record, wire transfer, or written communication from you, confirming the request and the amount." My mother looked at the index page. Her chin came up slightly. "The total," I said, "is $115,247. My father made a sound, not a word, just a sound. "I have receipts or bank documentation for $89,600 of that. The remaining $25,647 is documented through email correspondence. Your emails, Mom, in which you confirm the amount requested and the reason. 43 of those emails. They're tabbed in the back of the folder. I waited one beat. I build evidentiary cases for a living. I've been building this one for 3 years. My mother's voice came out careful, controlled, but thinner than usual. Emily, gifts between family. Folder 2. I set the red folder on top of the green one and opened it to the first page. The HELOC application, printed in full, my name across the top, the forged signature on the line at the bottom. This is the home equity line of credit application submitted to Kendrick Financial on October 8th, 14 months ago. In my name, bearing a signature that I did not write. She looked at the application. Something happened in her face. A shift so small that someone who hadn't watched that face their entire life wouldn't have caught it. Her jaw tightened. Just slightly. Just for a moment. The application was notarized on October 9th by Gerald Fitch, I continued, who, as you know, has been a family friend for 30 years. I was in London on both dates. I have 17 documents placing me there, passport stamps both entry and exit, airline manifests with my passport number, hotel receipts for 8 nights at the Harrington Hotel on Marylebone, and billing records from Garrison and Holt showing my client meetings on the 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th of October. Start time, end time, and client matter number. I turned to Dr. Howell's report summary. I also retained a forensic document examiner. Dr. Patricia Howell, 7 years of court-certified work, 4 years on contract with my firm. Her 7-page report concludes that the signature on this application is inconsistent with my own handwriting baseline and substantially consistent with a different handwriting sample I provided. I paused. That second sample came from your birthday cards to me, the ones I kept. All of them. Going back 11 years. The silence on that deck was unlike any silence I'd experienced with my mother before. Her other silences were tactical. She used them to let pressure build, to give her opponent room to capitulate. This silence was different. This was the silence of something running out of options. My father sat down on the deck bench. Slowly, like his legs had made the decision without consulting him. He put his elbows on his knees and looked at the grain of the cedar wood. My mother said, "You don't understand what we have been through. The house, folder 3. The white folder went on top of both of them. I opened it to the rental agreement. This is a standard residential lease for this property at $2,800 per month. That's the current fair market rate for comparable properties in this county. I had it verified by a real estate attorney. The agreement was reviewed by Marcus Elwell at Elwell and Cross on Prescott Avenue. If you wish to live here, those are the terms." I turned to the next page, the trespass notice. If you choose not to sign it, you do not have legal standing to be on this property. If you attempt to remain without my consent, this notice, which is already prepared and witnessed, will be filed immediately. That would result in a formal eviction proceeding, which, given the fraud documentation in folder 2, would proceed under circumstances I think you would rather avoid. The moving truck engine idled at the bottom of the drive. The driver was visible through the windshield, looking at his phone with the deliberate disinterest of a professional who has learned to not be present when things go sideways. My father looked up. He looked at the folders, then at me, then at my mother. His face was the face of a man who had made a long series of choices by choosing nothing, and who was only now, standing on the far edge of those choices, understanding what they'd added up to. My mother's arms had dropped. I hadn't noticed exactly when. She stood in the middle of my deck with her hands at her sides, and she looked at the 3 folders stacked on my table. And for the first time in my 31 years, she looked small. "Emily," she said. Her voice was not thin anymore. It was something I didn't have a word for. "We are your parents." "I know," I said. "And I have loved you both. And I have tried to be what you needed, and I have given you money I couldn't spare, and time I needed for myself and patience I had to manufacture every single day. I've done all of that because I believed in family. I still believe in family." I paused. But family does not forge your signature while you're working on another continent. Family does not draw $40,000 on a line of credit in your name and make minimum payments on it so it doesn't trigger a fraud alert. Family does not call your employer and describe you as unstable in the same month they're planning to seize your property. My voice stayed even. I had practiced this, not the words, but the evenness. I'm not here to punish you. I'm here for clarity. These folders are the clarity. My mother opened her mouth, closed it. My father said very quietly, "Diane." She looked at him. Whatever she saw in his face, and I think she saw something she recognized from a very long time ago, some version of her husband that had existed before the years of silence, stopped her. She stood there for a moment that felt much longer than it was. Then she said, "And I hadn't expected this. I had prepared for anger and deflection and tears, but not for this." She said in a voice barely above speaking level, "I didn't think you were paying that close of attention." I looked at her. I thought about the spreadsheet I'd opened on a November evening 7 years ago because numbers calm me when the rest of the world feels like standing in a current. I thought about 211 rows. I thought about eating rice and canned beans for 17 days so I could cover a car payment and then going home and opening my laptop and writing it down. "I've been paying attention my whole life," I said. "You just never thought that was something that would matter." She walked down the steps. No argument. No final word. She walked down the steps and across the gravel path to where my father was now standing at the base of the drive, and they spoke to the driver in voices I couldn't hear. The truck's transmission ground into reverse. It backed down the drive slowly, the way it had come, and turned at the bottom and went down the mountain road and disappeared behind the first line of pines. I stood on the deck until the engine sound was completely gone. Then I sat down at the outdoor table. My coffee was cold. I held the cup anyway. My hands were steady, which surprised me, because I had expected them to shake. Outside my body, everything had gone completely quiet. Just the lake, just the wind and the pines, just October light moving across 43 acres that had my name on the deed. I sat there for a long time. In the 3 weeks following, I retained Marcus Elwell formally. He sent a demand letter to my parents at their new address, a studio apartment in a complex outside Clearfield, which I had found through a simple property search regarding the HELOC account. The letter cited the fraud documentation, referenced Dr. Howell's forensic report by name, and gave them 60 days to respond with a plan to address the $40,000 liability that had been fraudulently placed on my credit. My mother called me twice in the first week. The first call I let go to voicemail. She left a 2-minute message. Her voice started controlled and became less so by the end. She said I was being vindictive. She said families don't sue each other. She said I would understand someday what sacrifice really looked like. She said she was sorry I felt the way I felt. I transcribed the message, time-stamped it, and added it to the property folder. The second call I answered. There was a long silence when I picked up, longer than she usually allowed. Then she said, "Your father wants to know if you'd consider letting the debt sit while we get settled." "No," I said, "but if you cooperate fully with the fraud dispute process, I won't file criminal charges. That offer stands for 30 days. She hung up. Their attorney, a young man from a small Clearfield firm, from his tone recently out of school, contacted Marcus 6 weeks later. He was professional. He was working with limited options, and he knew it. After 3 rounds of written correspondence, my parents agreed to a formal settlement, a legal acknowledgement of the HELOC liability, and a structured repayment plan of $800 per month drawn against my father's pension income. The $40,000 principal, plus documented interest costs I had incurred, would be fully repaid over 54 months. The $115,247 in the ledger was addressed in a separate instrument. Marcus drafted a promissory note for $85,000. I had asked him to reduce the total from the full ledger amount by choice, not mercy, not generosity, but a decision I made at my kitchen table one evening after looking at the numbers for a long time. I was not willing to treat all of it as a loan. Some of it, the very earliest payments, when I was 22 and 23 and didn't understand what was happening, those I let go. The rest I wanted acknowledged, not because I expected to see it repaid in full, because I needed the document to exist. I needed there to be something in writing that said, "This happened, I gave you this. It was real." They signed the promissory note. The HELOC notation came off my credit report 4 months later, after the fraud dispute was formally accepted by Kendrick Financial and escalated to their internal fraud investigation unit. My credit score had taken a 94-point hit when the account first appeared. It recovered 118 points over the following 6 months. As of March of this year, it sits at 751. I did not file criminal charges. I made that decision deliberately, and I made it alone, without Marcus's input, because it was mine to make. Not out of forgiveness. I am still working out what forgiveness means in a situation like this, and I'm not going to rush it. I made it because I knew what I wanted from this situation, and a criminal proceeding was not it. I wanted the debt acknowledged. I wanted my credit cleared. I wanted a legal instrument that documented the full history, signed by both of them, witnessed and notarized. I wanted a boundary that had the weight of law behind it, and that they would feel every month for the next 4.5 years, when the $800 automatic payment left their account. I got all of it. 6 months have passed. It is April now, and the mountain has come back to itself after a long winter. The pines sharp green against what's left of the snowpack on the upper ridges, the lake gone from winter pewter to something almost blue in the afternoon. This morning I sat on the deck with coffee and watched a pair of herons work the shallow end of the lake near the dock, and I didn't think about anything in particular for 20 minutes, which is something I couldn't have done a year ago. I'm back to full-time remote with Garrison and Holt, senior litigation analyst now, with a case designation that means I lead my own document review teams. I have a case right now involving 3 parties, 2 jurisdictions, and a paper trail that goes back 11 years. I find it deeply satisfying. I always did. The promissory note payments have come in on time for 4 consecutive months. I don't know what that costs them. I don't know what they say to each other about it. I don't know if my father's text message in January, "I'm sorry, Emily, for what it's worth," was a beginning of something or just a thing he needed to send. I haven't replied. I'm still deciding what I want that silence to mean, and whether I'm willing to be the one to break it. There is a cat. I found her in October, 3 days after the morning on the deck, thin and orange, and sitting at the base of the deck stairs with the composed attention of someone who had made a decision about where she was going to live and was simply waiting for the formalities. Her name is Archive. She sits on the windowsill above my desk while I work and watches the lake with the focused, unhurried attention of a very good investigator. She does not appear to miss anything. The smooth stone is back on the deck railing, the same one my mother picked up that September afternoon and turned over in her palm, calculating. I put it back after the truck left. It came from the lake bank, and it belongs there on the railing, and I see it every morning when I come outside with coffee, and it doesn't make me sad or angry. It just reminds me of what I know, that I built this place, and I documented its construction carefully, and no one is coming to take it from me. I want to say something directly to you, if that's all right. Something I've been turning over for a long time. If you are somewhere right now, keeping a record that nobody knows you're keeping, adding up the cost of staying quiet, counting the years, numbering the withdrawals against your account, I want you to know that the record matters. Not as a weapon, and not as a grudge, and not as something to brandish at a dinner table to win an argument. It matters because the act of writing something down is the act of saying, "This is real. This happened. I am not going to pretend it didn't." The people who drain you count on one thing above everything else. They count on you absorbing the cost of their comfort quietly, because keeping peace feels like love. And maybe if you can just hold on a little longer, it will start to feel like love. They count on you believing that family loyalty means accepting harm without naming it. Here is what 3 folders on a cedar deck in October taught me. Silence isn't peace. Silence is just the price you pay for someone else's comfort, quietly, every month, until the total crosses $115,000 and you're sitting on a kitchen floor because a lender called you about a debt you never agreed to. You don't have to be ready to do anything with the record yet. You don't have to confront anyone, file anything, or have a plan. Just document it, date it, keep it somewhere only you can see it, and know that the version of you who's been paying attention all this time is not small and not wrong and does not need anyone's permission to stop paying. Right now, the April light is coming in from the east, low and specific, the kind of light that finds the water and makes it bright. Archive is on the deck railing, sitting very still, watching something at the far edge of the lake that I can't see from here. She has that expression she gets, focused, patient, certain that the thing she's watching will eventually move in the direction she expects. Last October, I stood on this deck and held 3 folders in my arms and waited. This April, the drive is empty and the lake is quiet, and the 43 acres are exactly what they were always supposed to be. Mine. If you've ever had to put something in writing just to make it real, to prove to yourself that it happened, that it mattered, that you weren't imagining the cost of it, type, "I kept the record," in the comments. Or if you're still in it right now, still building the folder, still documenting quietly and waiting for the right time, type, "Still counting." Both take something real. Both are worth saying. If this story meant something to you, check the description for more stories just like this one. Thank you for being here. Wherever you are, I hope the light is good today.